Hello, Microgiants, and all of the rest of you have signed up and are running into this on YouTube. Appreciate that you're here today. We're going to talk about how do small businesses, motivate employees, and it's human resources. Employees is one of the really big issues that small businesses have. As we know, we've talked about this a lot on our series and shows. Today we've got three of the four consulting amigos who really does what we call expert topics for microgiants. And Ray Anderson is with us. He has really done uh, a direct amount of work with employees, first line, frontline people for some 30 years, I'd say. Is that about right, Ray?
Yeah,
And particularly in manufacturing to improve manufacturing processes and uh, to be able to increase productivity by, and partially listening, or maybe a lot listening to people who are actually doing the work to see, well, what the value can be to bring them as opposed to leaving them sort of alone and letting the guys in the office make some of the decisions. So he's done some groundbreaking work, especially going back 30 years ago when that wasn't as popular as it is today, maybe. John Mills has been around. He's had his own business in the electronics business and had some high-powered electronic type people as employees in those days, and has done consulting as well as Ray and I have as well. He currently is a property owner and does small office suites for independent business people, and so he's constantly involved with small business as well. And we know collectively that we all depend on employees, and they make our business better. They allow some larger businesses to exist. And it's while it might be in contrast to what we've also talked about, which is it's so darn hard to have employees in California. I mean, maybe you shouldn't even think about it if you're going to have a larger business because the employee laws are so tough that it makes it very difficult to do business, especially as a very young business. But today we want to focus on how do you, if you have employees or you're going to grow, you hope to grow big enough to have employees, how are you going to attract, hire, and motivate employees to be able to give you the kind of productivity that will keep you in business and make their lives and their business life rewarding as well. It's not an easy subject in any way, shape, or form. So Ray, having been kind of in this bailiwick for some time, lead us off and give us some of the uh, uh, three or four or five sort of basic concepts that you have used over the years to help employers motivate and utilize employees. What's the secret here, Ray?
well, there are no secrets. I
Ah,
think
no.
it's those of us, and we've all been married a long time. The truth is, it's all starts with listening, and I think where I've experienced a disconnect between perhaps let's call it management or owners and frontline is that we all get busy and stuck doing something, and I can't tell you the number of times I've had frontline employees tell me, well, they just don't listen to me, so I've stopped talking to them. And I think that's probably the biggest area where a company can really benefit from um, their frontline employees in such a way that it can really transform not only the productivity, but also quality of what comes out of the shop. When you sit there and listen to them, when they tell you, here's what's got to be done. I can remember, this is a funny little story, but basically I was going through a company that was making vinyl windows, and it was I mean, the place was just a mess. I mean, there were vinyl pieces all over the floor and stuff, and you had to stumble over them. And I said, you know, why don't you guys clean this up? And he said, they won't give us a broom. Now I know that sounds silly, but it's little things like that that have made it somewhat difficult. And I think we all, without suggesting that we're all weak or whatever. But the point is that, listening is sometimes hard. It's not because we can't, but we're preoccupied or whatever. And to my mind, that becomes an issue when you're trying to motivate employees. And way in which I found I could maybe transform the workplace was using what is called the employment training panel. And basically, it provided money up to $1,000 per employee to train them. And I think training has always been seen as an important, but not necessarily something that an employer felt he was going to do or should do. This state vehicle, which simply it takes money out of the unemployment insurance fund and transfers it to this fund in which any company in California can actually apply for it and draw it out to retrain and upgrade the skills of their workers. So,
Yeah. No, is that
I just want to say that, and that kind of puts
yeah.
you can put a bow around it or whatever.
Yeah, well, no, but I just wanted to mention that I don't think it's just California. Aren't those monies available at the state level in every state from the federal government?
It's possible, but
Okay,
the employment training panel is not a
that's
federal
California.
program. It's a California
That's
program
yeah.
alone.
Okay, okay.
And so, there may be training dollars available in other states through federal programs, but I never ran into them.
Yeah,
The one that I used was the one that I thought was it was transformative
yeah. Well,
in the
you've done
manufacturing companies I worked.
a ton of that stuff for many, many years. And so, and what I've learned from you is that one of the things that employees appreciate is that an employer will care enough about them to actually provide them the time to be able to upgrade their skills.
Right.
Because upgrading skills help them to advance and get a supervised job or whatever the next place is. So, and it also kind of gives a company an opportunity to have some control over how the training happens, as opposed to, say, having a community college do it. They took a course in such and now supposedly they're ready to go. You know, you and I have been involved in the manufacturing council for a number of years, and manufacturers tell us that, well, yeah, it was okay, but it never really specifically, it'll teach somebody how to run a CNC machine, but it doesn't really teach somebody how to do exactly what that business needs. So, you know, if the employer will kind of, you know, become enlightened enough to be able to spend the time and effort to care about proper training, that does not lead to an employee being happier and therefore more motivated.
Well, yeah, I think, basically, we all know that, motivated people, whether they're our children or our spouses or our employees, work better when they're happy. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? And
There you
so if
go.
you
Yeah.
if you take the time to be able to listen to them and provide them the tools they need to do their job, or modify their job in order for them to be able to do it more effectively, everybody wins. And the thing that I think is most important for a frontline worker is that he really knows what has to be done. And he'll too many times I had him say, well, hey, I've told him, but I'm done telling anybody because nobody seems to want to listen. And I think that's kind of tragic. And I'm not blaming people as much as knowing that they're all preoccupied and they're doing stuff. And as we all know, having a small business is a never-ending task machine.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that so that at least the people who are in the best position to make improvements and improve productivity, quality, and all the things that are important to a business are heard
Yeah.
and responded to. So, I mean, that's
So, yeah, and John, we're in a different place than we were a few years ago, with very close to full employment, or maybe over full employment based on, say, 4%. So we've been under 4% for several years. And with full employment, it's not as easy to hire people as it used to be. And you have to kind of bend over backwards in order to be able to attract them. I heard in a meeting this morning, was talking about The here in town, the police force is still way understaffed, about 15%, 10-15% understaffed. Um, no, it's actually 20-30% understaffed. They can't get enough applicants. And there's a lot of competition for police officers, for all of the reasons that, have been in the news about the police. They're having a very difficult time getting people to show up. They have to be qualified, of course, but they don't have to have a master's degree. I mean, they can have a couple of years of junior college, community college, and if they're the right person, but the competition being what it is, they can't fill those spots. And that's true with small business and business in general. There are not enough people to be able to select the best ones to do the particular job. Now, what do you do about that? How do you mitigate that? John, you have answers for us? We need some magic here.
Yeah, I don't know that I got it magic, but I mean, listening to the dialogue, and I want to differentiate the term employee, first of all. I think in my old world, you had jobbers or part-time guys who showed up and they wanted a paycheck for a period of time and they wanted to move on. We're not talking about those employees, I don't think. We're talking about employees who are potentially a longer-term relationship. They may be full-time employees or they may be full-time, part-time employees. And we do have this new group of employees that's evolved over the last 20 years where somebody can have 3 part-time jobs on a full-time basis. In other words, that part-time job will continue for several years, and they'll do that part-time job with that company for an extended period of time. And in a way, they mimic full-time employees, but they're not, they're part-time. So let's talk about the longer-term employees for a start. And then I'm going to come back to your conversation about happy and motivated and what do employees need or want. Now, back in the day, we used to say, show me in a meaningful way, and we'd all joke about it. The only meaningful way that we knew about was, with money. That was how you showed an employee you valued them. However, research would actually prove that that's incorrect. Money is important and necessary, and it needs to be in the realm of acceptable behavior because everybody likes to have respect in what they get paid. Nobody likes to get paid for less than they should be paid. So accepting that as one of the issues, I would say the biggest issue is to feel part of a team, to be known, and to know. And this is getting into Ray's bailiwick, which he does extremely well, is that if that employee is valued, and what does valued mean? And in this case, we're not talking about money, but his time is valued, his advice is valued, his input is valued. He's listened to. Now, he may not always be agreed to, but at least he's listened to, and that position will be put forward, and then the decision may be made to do something other than what he wanted or she wanted. But there's still this element of dialogue that goes into making a case and being part of the outcome, and then going along with whatever that outcome is. So I would say to know and be known, and I think that some of those companies who do it really well end up having a culture. And so now you've got a culture of a company that attracts people who share the desire to be part of that culture. And I think, I don't know now, but I think for a long time, Starbucks had a culture and they valued. Now they've gone up and down over the years, but there was a point in time where they had a very distinct culture for their employee force. Some of the other companies out here, I've got a friend of mine who runs several ServiceMaster-related businesses. And what's ended up happening is he's grown and grown and grown with several of those businesses. And part of the reason it's grown is because they have a cohort of people in every business that acts like a family. They actually listen to one another. They share the load. Some people really don't like doing this aspect of the work. Well, sometimes you just have to do it. However, there are opportunities where that piece of work could be done by somebody else who actually loves to do it, whatever that is. And it could be any piece of the task that needs to be done. So once you understand that we have proclivities that, we love to do and some that don't, and we work together and we work through it, but you can't be a prima donna and say, hey, I'm just not going to do this. You do have to, pick it up and carry it sometimes. So I'm going to come back and say, what makes successful employees has been a little bit in jeopardy because we've gone to this part-time hourly rate type thing, and now it's more about how do we actually get on and be part of the team. I think teams is an important idea. The concept of a cohort is an important idea, but it's got to be able to be still led with some decision that comes out of it that may be independent of what that team does.
Yeah.
It can't be groups. It can't be group think, but it can be group discussion.
Yeah, good points. I'm going to disagree with you, or not disagree. I'm going to pull in the group you excluded, which would be those people who are there for a short time job. I don't ignore those. And the reason being is that some businesses have to deal with them. Restaurants have to deal with high turnover.
Mm.
When I was, a long time ago, when I was in the retail business, I had 7 stores to staff, and one year we hired 50 people. So we were doing an awful lot of work, jumping around, trying to figure out how to find these people and get them in place and train them and that kind of stuff. Now, just to give you a little perspective, we only had 20 full-time jobs, but we had hired 50 people. We knew we were making some mistakes somewhere. That
Right.
should not happen because that means everybody's there a couple of months and they're gone.
Right.
So what we did is we had a concerted effort to stop that and slow the turnover down. And the following year, with several different methods, we were able to get it down to the point to where we only had hired about 30 people for 20 full-time equivalent jobs. So, we made a lot of progress. And one of the ways, of course, you can start by giving them a little bit more money, but we could not compete with the larger, say, department stores. We had, in those days, of course, we had no benefits program. Nobody provided health care in those days. So I mean, that helped a little bit, but we couldn't do a retirement program. We couldn't do most of the things that would keep an employee interested for a long period of time. And we also were a very young kind of a shop, appealing to college folks up to maybe age 28 or so. So it was a very specific kind of marketplace. So we didn't want, 50, 60-year-old people coming in and trying to sell. And now that might be illegal to do today, but that is a marketing no-no. And we were to the point where this was so sensitive back in those days that we used to turn the music up really loud when anybody over 40 would come in the store because we did not want them in there. We didn't want to ruin our reputation. Now, and that sounds crazy, but it worked really well.
Yeah.
And so here's what we did. We gave them a little bit more money and we had a regular schedule so that they could know and understand what was going to happen. So much of a raise after a month and so much after 90 days, that kind of thing. So we wanted them to know there would be a little bit more money, not a lot, but we also told them up front, you will never make as much money as the department store across the street because we simply can't afford to do that. And, therefore, here's what you will gain by working for us. We will train you so well that they will want to hire you, and we will be the best reference you can find. And that's what we did. And so we started having Saturday morning clinics at 9 o'clock. I told them about my recent trips to New York or Los Angeles or wherever we were going, what's happening, in fashion, how's it going to be affecting us? They loved that. Now they're on the inside of the skinny. We had developed a state reputation, which became a national reputation, and people wanted to work for us because they were turned down at the bigger stores. They were too young, they looked too hip for whatever reason, and so we would bring them along, and in 6 months or a year or whenever it was natural for them to move on, and we knew there was not an assistant manager or a manager's job for that person. we would say, you don't quite have the qualifications to become a manager, and therefore, you're going to hit the top level and you could be done. We love what you're doing, but we just want you to understand that if you care about this and you're going to stay in the retail business, we won't hold it against you if you take another job. And we became a training mill. We taught them how to do windows and interior displays, and we taught them how to sell. We brought Zig Ziglar, and nobody's heard of him, but he used to be the not you guys,
He was the number one, yeah.
number
Yeah.
one sales guy. We really trained them very well. We didn't know what we were doing, but we cared enough because, well, we just couldn't withstand this huge hiring thing. It just took too
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
So that worked really well. Our old friend Ray, Mr. Dr. Trafton,
Oh, yeah.
used to, our old consulting buddy, he used to say, if you think you're going to motivate by a raise, forget it. A
Yeah.
raise
Yeah.
only lasts, what was it, 6 weeks, Ray? Something like
Yeah.
that.
It's ridiculous. Money doesn't do anything to motivate
Yeah.
you.
And so, it's like you can't just pay more. You've got to do these intangible things. And one of the things we did was we really impressed upon them our brand, and our brand was very, very strong. We spent money on high-end advertising so that our employees would be proud of who we were.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example. And to piggyback even on what John said, the truth is that, money won't keep them there, but the culture and their sense of belonging and their sense of being a part of a team are intangibles that will draw new people in. It's the truth is that, people come into a business basically by first asking somebody else, what's it like to work there? And it may be a friend or whatever. And if the company is really doing a good job of developing their people and listening to them, their employees will attract the better employees. They'll say, hey, you got to come over here and work.
Yeah, good point. An internal cultural push is a great benefit if you can figure out how to do that.
Well, I think,
Well,
to piggyback on what you said, Ron, what you tried to do when you had those 7 stores is to focus on, developing their skills. And I'm sure that carried a lot of weight with other people as they were looking for a job and they talked to their friends who worked for one of your stores saying, yeah, that sounds like a good place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reputation got around, and people would come back and say, oh, yeah, I got hired by so and so, our competitor. And we're going, hey, that's great. That's really great. And he said, yeah, and they're paying me a little bit more money and so forth. And well, we just love it. He said, you know what they said? They said, if because you had worked at Burgess Boyd or one of our stores or the Old Soft Shoe, because you worked there, we're going to hire you because we know you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
it's like that's the highest accolade, and a normal small business would, and they freaked out. It's like, what? You can't go to work for my competitor. I mean, tell them our secrets or whatever. Well, nobody at these big stores is going to pay any attention to them. It's like, we want you to come in trained. We don't want to listen to you. They weren't Ray Anderson advocates.
Yeah, no, true that.
John.
Yeah, so I'm thinking as we're talking about why people flip it around, why people leave an employment with it, and I go back over my own experience. Perhaps you guys can go over, but most of the time you leave the employment or the relationship that you got with a company, not because of the compensation as much, although that could be a factor, but it's through not being treated right or not being valued or not being respected. It's a lot of the intangibles that make you go, or there's a personality conflict somewhere along the line. How many times have you, said, no, I don't want to be there anymore. I don't like the way I'm treated or I feel. Yeah. So, I don't want to go down the feeling road, but at the same time, and Ron, you taught me this years ago, on the front end, let's attract people in for the right reasons. Let's tell them what to expect. Let's present a true fact of how we operate and why we operate. And then people will either accept that or not accept it, but don't do a bait and switch and kind of make out that you're something that you're not. There has to be some honesty and some integrity in the way you and how you advertise and how you bring in either clients and or team members. And of course, a big way of doing that is having the team itself be part of that process. And so the team, people say, how do you bring on a new hire? Well, they sit around with my team. I've already made a decision, but I want my team to come to the same conclusion. And so there's an element of trying to get your team to come along and say, yeah, this guy, we'll help him, because he's either in competition to them or they're going to be supporting him and making him part of the team.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I was going to build on that a little bit, John. The truth is that, in working closely at the front line, there were so many times that I found that people were leaving because basically, as we all know, the biggest issue in leaving is usually who manages you. And if that manager is not listening, is not making you a part of the team, your likelihood of leaving is very, very strong. And what they're looking for is upper management to be able to hear that and eliminate people who are creating obstacles for the continuation of the culture. And so, this goes back to the point we were making. You want to motivate your employees, listen to them, find out who's effective at management and who may not be effective, and build on it from there.
Well, you guys bring up a really excellent point, and I guess it kind of begs the question. So what are some advice to small businesses to, some action items in order to kind of look like you're fair? I think that there are, and we on our family run, shows where we've got a couple of generations or more, it tends to have a certain authority come into the plant or the office because you're a family member. And now this person begins telling people other things. And so it just comes with all kinds of baggage. So it's awfully important to make sure that it is fair in the sense that, well, on one hand, people who don't have authority are not telling people what to do. That's number one, I suppose. But also that there are a set of expectations that are well thought out. So the employee really knows when they're doing a good job and when they're doing an exceptional job. The middle managers have to understand that and treat them with respect and fairly. And so in a way, that's kind of the hardest thing to do, is to get that group of people who are, between top management and frontline people to really get and understand what managing people is about, and that the company policies are fair. Build on that a little bit, Ray. What are some of the things that you can do to ensure that you don't have a rogue supervisor that is not treating somebody fairly when maybe all their team are working really hard, and he overlooks certain things because he becomes friends with one? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it comes down to whether you've really effectively built a culture that endorses and builds on team. And if you're getting pushback from the team, and that means you have to listen to them, and that team is telling you this man or this lady is not really effectively handling us, or in fact is handling us, it's not good for the company. And so again, it comes back to the point we were making, is if you have a team culture, the team culture itself will be able to police people who are not effective. But it means that you have to give them the liberty and the ability to be able to do that. I mean, that's been my experience. And the more you give them an opportunity to be able to grow and respond to what's going on, you can eliminate those people who are not effectively helping.
Yeah, talk about doing 360 type evaluations on the supervisors and front office people as well as executives. What kind of feedback coming from the top down and from the bottom up that seems to be effective in a lot of respects, but I know it's a little controversial. What's your thought?
Well, I found that I think I think it became cumbersome. I mean, I remember using 360s, but the bottom line is that it's more about how well you've developed a culture so that the culture can take care of it. Starting to use tools like that are not necessarily the answer to the question. They just sometimes I found that they just add a dimension of concern to people because once you start responding to these instruments, who's going to get this information, and is this going to come back and bite me in the butt because I said something as an example about John that he may not want to hear, and how is he going to respond to that?
Yeah, difficult
So
questions.
that brings up another one. I'm a big believer in using personality trait profiling or indicators like PI, for example, one of the many out there, but it's a wonderful tool for benchmarking some profiles that you've got. And then in the middle of that, you can then open up a dialogue that is open between how I operate as a human being and you operate as a human being, and this can be some understanding and even dialogue where Ray says, Ray, I really don't like it when you have this dictatorial manner that comes over because, you are in charge, but, now you start telling me and it closes me down. And so now the dialogue opens up and now we can talk about it. One of the key things I think that happens is small business entrepreneurs, they've got high drive and they've got high execution and they've got a lot invested. And therefore, when push comes to shove, sometimes, guys, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. Does anybody have a problem with that? Because you're either with me or against me. Right.
If you do, here's the door. Right.
And you can feel the tension in that kind of a dialogue. And I'm not saying there's no room for that. There is room for that from time to time. But the ego of the driving force needs to be subservient to being conducive in that culture. And it is very difficult because those of us who've started our own companies, we do have a strong driving force. And we are capable to step out and say, hey, guys, this is where we need to go, and we need to go there now. And here's the order we're going to go in. Right. I mean, that's what we do, right? But at some point, that if you're going to get the rest of the 2, 3, 10 people, we've got to have consensus. And it's okay. We hope we don't die on the mound waiting for consensus because the plane took off. And we're like, well, that was a nice idea, but, too late now. Right. So that's where the tension is. So we need to start off with, guys, we need a huddle. I need your input. You need to tell me what you think, because if you don't tell me, I can't read between the lines. Yeah. So let's get it out. And so that comes to the art of discussion and dialogue. Ron, I'd like to say that perhaps we've worked on that art a little bit because we certainly do a lot of discussion and we certainly do a lot of disagreement. But at the end of the day, the goal is to come out with a better way of doing whatever it is that we're doing. Yeah. So I'd like to think that's...
You take two bullheaded people, and the China shop is not in great shape, but the people are usually the bulls are usually pretty good. But that's that's not the way employees are, and so that's why you've got to be so careful.
You've got to be careful,
not to overstep them, to make them feel, to intimidate them, and it's got to be an open culture in the sense that you can come here and you can tell us your opinion. Let's not get into, say, politics. Let's talk about how this line is working. Let's talk about our customer service and are we, serving the customer. That's important for management to say, okay, our priority is customers. Our next priority is these are the focuses that we want you to achieve. And therefore, we don't want to talk about the way the guy takes the trash out because you just don't happen to like that. That's not a key issue for us. The trash will get out. Let's not get hung up on that. We have to have a great product, and it's got to be timely, and we got to have good service. These are the things.
So ultimately, what you're talking about,
that's culture.
That's culture, right? Yeah. But it's also intimacy. It's coming down to when you get 10 guys from this company show up, they're going to respond similarly on a few things. They're going to understand what the mission and the vision and the values are, and they're going to say, hey, and for this particular job, you need Trevor over there, or you need Ray, or you need Ron. Can somebody help us outline the objective of the day? Well, I know I've got a few friends who do that better than me. Let's get them to do it. It's not that they're better or worse. That's a gift they've got. Mm-hmm. And I think it's being able to share that.
Yeah, I was going to say, John, I was going to piggyback on what you said about tools. You use different tools than I. I've been using the disc for 30 years. I like it. I think it provides, like you said, examples of how and what behavioral qualities this person comes into the job with, and how you can potentially use that in a more effective way to make best use of them and to be able to help the company. It all goes back down to having a culture in which you listen to people and you have an idea of where this person can be effective instead of placing them in an area or her in an area where she's not effective. So, it's a combination of being able to, help them become all they can be, at the same time helping the company become what it needs to be.
I'm glad both of you
Yeah.
brought that up. We've all used these tools in the past, all three of us, and I think that overall, when you take a look at it, it has tempered me. It tempers other management and owners just to recognize that people are different, and you need to have different functions done in the business, and you want to put people in jobs where they'll be successful.
Mm.
And therefore I think we would all heartily endorse to any small business person who's hiring, number one or number 100, to be sure to investigate, look at, and attempt to use these tools. Maybe it should help you hire better. It might help you'll learn how to manage better, but maybe what it does is it's an ego tamper to try
Mhm.
and help managers, dial it back a little bit. Just because you're in that position doesn't mean you're always right.
Yeah.
And it certainly doesn't mean that you can talk to people any way you want. When we know, the three of us know, that different personalities receive information differently than somebody else. That's really key. And I think it's terribly important that we kind of leave everybody with the idea that there are tools out there that can be utilized. This is a big, big deal for the success of a company, and you can't de-emphasize it in the old way, especially with our employment, as we've talked about. You have to be able to select people that are going to get the job done. They're not always the best people. You don't need the best people. You need people that will accomplish the task appropriately based on on the particulars, the specifications, and the vision of the business. And
Yeah, I do agree with
yeah,
that.
so
Yeah, I was going to
So I
add
got
one
one
more
other.
thing.
Okay,
John,
go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say, recently for Oak Valley College, I had all the freshman students go through my student version. And the reason I like the student version is it prints out a list of jobs that are really um, appropriate to that person's behavioral style.
yeah.
And it's fascinating to me to have the kids look through it and say, I didn't even know this job existed. Or
Oh yeah.
I didn't know I could be good at this. And I think, the whole purpose is that, many times, when I came out of high school and college, I really didn't understand what I could be good at. I just went out and took the job because it was there. And so
That's
to
right.
have some barometer for you to say, this is something you may want to look at,
Yeah,
it really helps kids tremendously in my mind.
absolutely. Finishing
Yeah, so
word, John. I know you've got to wrap it up for
I've
us.
got one question that I've used several times when I've been on my game a little bit, and that is either dealing with people who are on the outside and you're trying to get to know them, or they want to bring them in as a client or bring them in as a team member. And I asked them something to the effect of, how is it I can help you do what you want to do? What can I do? What can we do to help you? And it's an open-ended question. It's very easy to answer with something that's trite, but it's also, somebody will come out and say, well, really, I just need a broom to brush up the trash. Or, I don't know whether you knew or not, but my key only works between, 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock. I can't come in before time to work.
Yeah.
I mean, quite often I want to get here at 6, so I got some quiet time to get things done. But my key won't work because it's locked out. Sometimes it's the simplest of questions, but what can I do to help you? And then try to make a commitment to try to help them do whatever it is they need to do.
Right. I remember
Yeah,
interviewing someone from, I can't remember, it was a large company like, I don't know, AT&T or something like that, happened to be at a Rotary meeting, and he happened to be speaking, and the question came up similar to this, and his answer I'll never forget. And he said, you have to remember that the president of the company, he might look like a big high-powered guy, and yes, he's got a lot of influence, but the truth is that we turn our organization upside down. I'm working for everybody else.
mm,
Yes,
They're not
and
working
there's
for me.
right. And there's another element, there's a whole discussion to go with the topic of servant leadership.
That's
And
it.
servant leadership in its best form. And the reverse of that is when something goes wrong, when one of the people on your team messes up or something happens. I have learned that it's my fault. It is my responsibility, and I will publicly own up to it. Because somewhere along the line, the training was incomplete, the directions were incomplete, or I could have impacted in some way. I don't have a problem with owning that up. Then we'll sit down with the individual and say, okay, how can we avoid this next time? What is it I can do to help you not do this? I hold accountability jointly with them, but I will own it out front.
Yeah.
It's his fault. The guy left the door open and the cat ran away. I don't know. It wasn't my job.
Yeah,
well,
but
you
never told him to leave the door closed.
Yeah, well, so that's my point.
That's right.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. We'll wrap it up for today. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and effort, and especially your wisdom. And I hope those of you out there have appreciated it. There's a lot of wisdom here. You could watch this 3 or 4 times and still come away with some good, solid stuff to help you do a better job in your business. Thank you very much. We'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
Sure.